thing about meeting Hollywood superstars, is the stories that they tell you about the people that they've met. And I always find that more fascinating than the movies or the stories about their career is really the story for me. Because when they get a little bit older, they want to tell you about the great people that in fact that, you've only heard about, that they've actually sat down with and had, say, a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. And you think, wow, what was that person like, And one of the most really, I suppose, biggest names you could think of in the history books would be that of Jackie Onassis, or Jackie Kennedy, the First Lady, of course, of the United States. She was almost like the royalty of the United States, along with her husband, President Kennedy. But as this great man, who I thought was absolutely terrific, the Man from U.N.C.L.E. star, Robert Vaughn, passed on this wonderful story to me about what Jackie Kennedy told him about our wonderful British royal family. As ever, let me explain. Morning, chums, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And yes, look at that behind me. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago we filmed here and all those beautiful roses were out? Where they all gone? They've all died. But don't look at me. It's nothing, don't point fingers. I've done nothing wrong. I literally just arrived and I thought, you know what, that was a nice sort of fresh backdrop, a nice setting, And I thought, yeah, we'll do it from there. Suddenly you get here and you think, but I mean, you're experts. I know a lot of the chums know a lot about gardening. Do they not last long then, these roses? Or is it the heat? Have we not watered them enough? Let me know if you know, because it's a bit like daffodils, isn't it? I get upset when the daffs go because they only last about 2.5 weeks, and yet you have to get them while you can. But what a lovely fragrant colour all of that is. Yes, you agree, don't you? You do. Yeah, of course you do. Well, hopefully, yes. Well, yes, all right, we'll get on with the story. The thing is, Robert Vaughn, as you know, the Man from U.N.C.L.E., lovely guy, got on incredibly well with him. We met when he came over here to London. He was starring in a play at the time, actually. And we just got on. And a lot of people only really remember him as the Man from U.N.C.L.E., but he was in things like The Protectors. Do you remember that, with Nari Dawn Porter, beautiful actress, and the theme tune, Avenues and Alleyways, sung by, of course, a good friend, Tony Christie. Yeah, you see, it's all there, isn't it? Now, what I liked about Robert Vaughn was he was a little bit prickly at first, but once you got through that shell, he had a lot of wonderful stories because he'd been around a long time, knew everybody, the greats, the James Deans, all of that sort of stuff. And, he just enjoyed the job. And one day we were just sitting there having a cup of tea, and I said, did you ever meet President Kennedy? He said, oh, yeah. And I said, oh, right, I said, did you meet Jackie? Oh, yes, he said. Now, here's where this story got interesting for me, because, as you know, there's a sort of story goes around about how Jackie Kennedy and the Queen didn't exactly hit it off or get on. And I've never really bought into that, because I've always thought that the Queen really wouldn't be bothered by any other female. I mean, there was a great line, wasn't there, about when apparently Margaret Thatcher's office rang up and said, what would the Queen be wearing, today, because she didn't want to clash. Apparently the aide said, oh, don't worry, the Queen doesn't notice what anybody else is wearing. I thought, what a terrific line, you know what I'm saying? What a put down as well for Mrs. Thatcher. But the thing was, of course, Jackie and the President met for the first time in the early 60s at a sort of formal dinner, and then a little bit later on. And they had telephone conversations after the sad demise of President Kennedy. But according to Robert, one of the things that really irritated Jackie O about Her Majesty the Queen wasn't to do with anything regal or the way that things were, but apparently the Queen very sort of sublimely would tell her off for smoking. You see, Jackie O was a 3 packs a day plus heavy smoker. And this was a bit of a shock to me, because I said, oh, I didn't know that. And he said, oh, yeah, she smoked all the time. And according to Robert, they had an agreement with the media that they would never picture Jackie O with a cigarette. So, if there was one, she had a cigarette holder, but she didn't get pictured with it. And I'm fascinated. And apparently when the first sort of banquet, the Queen sort of said, oh, do you need to keep striking up? And, because she got through quite a lot of cigarettes, even at that royal banquet. And, it sort of got a little bit, yes, because obviously Jackie was used to smoking a lot of cigarettes. Now, all of this sort of was, well, as you say, a little bit frosty. And the reason behind that really was Her Majesty the Queen had seen exactly what he'd done to her late father, King George, who was also a heavy smoker, something that she'd not taken up, but her younger sister, Margaret Rose, the Princess Margaret, had. So that was really the thing. You know, she kept saying, I'm trying to get Margaret to stop, you know, all this sort of stuff. When she turned up again, the Queen still picked up this thread, and they basically agreed to disagree. And Robert said that Jackie would sort of do this story about when anybody asked her about the Queen, they say, oh yeah, she's lovely, but she doesn't have to go on if you smoke. Don't strike up a cigarette or else, you know, you'll never hear the end of it. And we both laughed about that because I thought, wow, you'd never imagine the Queen to be like that. My theory is this, that I think she was just being kind, caring, and trying to sort of do it in a very gentle way. Because according to Robert, at the time that they met the next time, the Queen said, oh, I don't know where the ashtrays are. I don't know whether they, you know, the sort of help of taking them away, just so that she wouldn't strike up. But eventually, the Queen had to relent and find a royal ashtray. Either way, it's always refreshing to find these inside secrets from listening back to these wonderful interviews that, you know, you think, oh, we didn't use that because it wasn't about the play. Good to know. Anybody else agree? And please do respectfully comment, like and share if you can. Neil Shawn, Kensington, London.